Some stories aren't just told. They're lived, etched into your very bones. This one, about the men who stole everything and tried to bury me, is as real as the calluses on my hands. I still remember the exact moment the life drained from my face, the words, "You're useless," or echoing as Torvin and Rylan locked the door to the company I built, leaving me on the damp sidewalk of a Portland autumn, a worthless sheaf of papers fluttering from my grasp. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel. Tell us where you're from and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. The year was 1978. I was 22 in Portland, Oregon. Felt like a canvas waiting for a grand masterpiece. Not the quaint, artisanal Portland you might know today, but city still gritting its teeth, its industrial heart pumping alongside the gentle rhythm of the Willamette River. I was fresh out of technical college, my head buzzing with circuit diagrams and the scent of solder. My name is Orrin Kalin, and back then, I believed in the inherent goodness of people, in the power of a handshake, and the boundless potential of a good idea. My good idea, the one that would eventually become my cross to bear, was an energy optimization sensor. In an era where power consumption was an afterthought for most factories, I saw waste. I'd spent countless nights hunched over a workbench in my cramped, borrowed garage in the Woodstock neighborhood, surrounded by blinking LEDs and the hum of my oscilloscope. I was obsessed. My sensor, a complex weave of microprocessors and proprietary algorithms, could monitor industrial machinery in real time, identifying inefficiencies and dramatically reducing power usage. It wasn't flashy, but it was revolutionary. It was elegant, and it worked. I poured my entire being into that project. My inheritance, a modest sum from my grandmother, went straight into components and patents. Every waking hour was dedicated to refining the prototype. I was fueled by cheap coffee and the dream of making a tangible difference, of building something that mattered. I was a technologist, not a businessman. I knew my circuits, but the world of market shares and venture capital was a foreign language. This vulnerability, this naive idealism, was precisely what made me a perfect target. I met Torvin Vance and Rylan Croft at a small industry mixer held in a dusty convention hall downtown. I was awkwardly clutching my prototype, a clunky box of wires and circuit boards, trying to explain its potential to anyone who'd listen. Most politely nodded and moved on. Then came Torvin. He was older, maybe mid-40s, with a smile that could charm a rattlesnake and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He had a tailored suit, a confident swagger, and a handshake that felt like a promise. Rylan, his silent partner, stood a step behind, a man of fewer words but equally sharp eyes, always observing. Torvin listened, really listened, to my convoluted explanation. He asked intelligent questions, cutting through my technical jargon to the core of the innovation. "Orrin," he said, his voice a smooth baritone, "this isn't just a sensor. This is the future. This is efficiency. This is profitability." He spoke my language, but through a different lens. He saw the dollar signs where I saw the elegant solution. Over the next few weeks, they courted me. They took me to lunches at respectable downtown establishments, not the greasy spoons I was used to. They spoke of synergy and vision. They painted a picture of a company, our company, revolutionizing industries. They were experienced, they had connections, and they had the capital I lacked. They would handle the business, the sales, the growth. I would be the technical genius, the architect of innovation. "You, Orrin, are the engine," Torvin declared one evening, clinking a crystal glass of amber liquid with mine. "Rylan and I, we're just the skilled mechanics, making sure that engine runs at its peak. Together, we're unstoppable." I was flattered, intoxicated by their confidence and their apparent belief in me. They made me feel valuable, brilliant even. They proposed a partnership, 50-50 initially, with a clear path to growth. They drafted an impressive-looking agreement. My lawyer, a kind old man who usually handled wills and property disputes, skimmed it quickly and advised caution, but I was too eager, too blinded by the dream. I signed. The company was born, Synergy Systems. We set up shop in a modest industrial park on the east side, a space they secured. Torvin and Rylan handled the permits. The initial marketing, the networking. I, true to my word, buried myself in the lab. I refined the sensor, designed new iterations, worked on manufacturing processes. I hired and trained a small team of technicians, eager young people like myself, who believed in what we were building. I was often first to arrive and the last to leave, sometimes catching a few hours of sleep on a cot in my workshop. The smell of circuit boards a comforting lullaby. And it worked. Within months, Synergy Systems was not just surviving, it was thriving. Our sensors, initially met with skepticism, proved their worth. Factories in Portland, then Seattle, then across the Pacific Northwest, began to adopt our technology. We secured contracts with timber mills, food processing plants, even a fledgling aerospace manufacturer. The numbers soared. We expanded our facility, hired more staff. Torvin was a master of sales, Rylan a wizard with logistics, and I, Orrin Kalin, was a quiet architect behind it all. I finally felt like I belonged, that my work had a purpose, that I was part of something bigger. But as the company grew, so did the subtle shifts. My name, once prominently featured on our marketing materials, began to recede, replaced by the collective Synergy Systems team or just our founders. I'd asked Torvin about it. Orrin, my boy, he clapped me on the shoulder. You're too valuable in the lab. We don't want to distract you with public relations. Let us handle the noise, you handle the genius. It sounded plausible, even considerate. Then came the meetings I was slowly excluded from. Just a high-level financial discussion, Orrin, not your domain. Torvin would explain. We're protecting your time, allowing you to focus on what you do best. Rylan would just give a tight smile. I started feeling a strange disconnect. My creations were out there, making a difference, making money, but I felt increasingly isolated within my own company. There were whispers, too, from the newer hires. Little things. Mr. Vance said he came up with the initial concept. Mr. Croft was talking about how they almost gave up before the breakthrough. I dismissed them. Gossip, jealousy. Torvin and Rylan were my partners, my friends. They were family, weren't they? The turning point came with the Evergreen Industries contract. It was massive, a multi-million-dollar deal that would cement Synergy Systems as a national player. We had been working on it for months, my team and I designing custom solutions, Torvin and Rylan negotiating the terms. The day the deal closed, a Friday in late September, the office buzzed with excitement. I felt a surge of pride, a deep, quiet satisfaction. This was it. We had made it. Torvin called me into his newly expanded, opulent office. Rylan was there, sitting silently in an expensive leather chair, a faint smirk playing on his lips. The air was thick, heavy, not with celebration, but with something colder. Orrin, Torvin began, his voice devoid of its usual warmth. We need to talk about your role in Synergy Systems. My stomach clenched. My role? What about it? We just landed Evergreen. Indeed, Rylan interjected, his voice surprisingly sharp, and that's precisely why we need to make some adjustments. Torvin leaned forward, his hands clasped on the polished mahogany desk. Orrin, you're a brilliant engineer. Truly, but you lack business acumen. You lack vision beyond the circuit board. You're a liability in the boardroom, a bottleneck. The words hit me like physical blows. What are you talking about? I built this technology. I am Synergy Systems core. No, Orrin, Torvin said, his eyes cold. Synergy Systems is Torvin Vance and Rylan Croft. We built the company. You provide a component, a very useful component. We grant you that. But components are replaceable. He pushed a stack of papers across the desk. These are the new operating agreements. We've restructured. Your shares have been diluted to a nominal percentage, reflecting your true contribution. I stare at the papers, my heart pounding in my ears. Diluted? Nominal? This is insane. This is what we agreed to. Rylan finally spoke, his voice flat. The original agreement had clauses. Orrin, performance clauses, management discretion. You've been notified multiple times of your deficiencies, your lack of participation in strategic planning, your inability to adapt to market demands. It was All lies, carefully constructed fabrications. They have been building this case against me for months, documenting my failures to justify their betrayal. We've decided, Torvin continued, his voice now dripping with contempt, to buy out your remaining shares. For a fair market value, of course. The figure he quoted was a pittance, barely enough to cover my outstanding personal debts. Certainly not reflective of the millions the company was now worth. Consider it a severance package. A generous one, given your limited utility going forward. I felt the blood drain from my face. Utility? You're calling me useless? After everything I poured into this? My life, my savings, my invention? My voice cracked, raw with disbelief. Torvin stood, his smile returning, but it was a shark smile. Precisely, Oren. You're useless to us now. The technology is stable. We have engineers who can maintain it. We have the patents. We have the business. We don't need your emotional investment anymore. Rylan walked to the door, opening it. Collect your personal effects from your lab. Oren, you have 1 hour. Security will escort you out. The world spun. My stomach churned. I tried to argue, to fight, but their lawyers had made sure every loophole was sealed. They had planned this meticulously, methodically stripping me of everything I had built, leaving me with nothing but the bitter taste of betrayal. I walked out of that office in a daze, my hands shaking as I gathered a few personal items from my lab. My tools, my notebooks, a photo of my grandmother. The smell of solder, once comforting, now felt like ash in my throat. As I stepped out of the building, into the biting Portland autumn air, Torvin and Rylan stood framed in the doorway, watching me. Torvin's voice, though distant, carried on the wind. Goodbye, Oren. Try not to be too useless out there. Then Rylan, with a final, chilling click, locked the door. I stood there on the damp sidewalk, a worthless sheaf of papers fluttering from my grasp, the cold rain beginning to fall. The company I had built, the dream I had poured my life into, was gone, stolen. I was 22, utterly broke and hollowed out. The city that had once held my boundless dreams now felt like a vast, indifferent tomb. The word useless echoed in my head, a relentless drumbeat. I walked for hours, the rain soaking through my clothes, until I found myself sitting on a cold bench overlooking the Willamette, watching the gray water flow. I felt utterly, completely broken. The next few years were a blur of odd jobs, cheap rentals, and a constant, suffocating cloud of depression. I drifted, a ghost in my own life, the betrayal, a festering wound that refused to heal. I saw their company's name in the news, their faces in business magazines, their wealth growing, built on the bones of my ambition. Each mention was a fresh stab, a reminder of what I had lost and what they had taken. The world had swallowed me whole, just as they intended. But one night, 7 years later, staring at my gaunt reflection in the grimy window of a forgotten diner, something shifted. The weariness, the despair, the self-pity, it was still there, a heavy cloak. But beneath it, a cold, hard ember began to glow. It wasn't just anger. It was a quiet, insidious resolve. They called me useless, stripped me bare, and left me for dead. They had succeeded in breaking me, for a time. But in that moment, I saw not a useless man, but a man who had been made to feel useless. And that man, broken and scarred, was finally ready to rise. I didn't know how or when, but I knew with every fiber of my being, I would be back, and they would regret every single word. The image in that greasy diner window wasn't just my reflection. It was a ghost, a gaunt, hollow-eyed stranger, framed by the grime and the neon glow of a flickering, open sign. 7 years had peeled away my youth, replacing it with a weariness that felt ancient. 7 years of Portland's rain washing over me, yet never quite cleansing the bitter taste of useless. The word had become my shadow, whispering the quiet hours, echoing in every failed endeavor. But that night, as I stared at the man I had become, something shifted. The self-pity, the crushing weight of depression, it was still there, a suffocating blanket. But beneath it, a tiny, defiant spark ignited. It wasn't the fiery rage of a wronged man. Not yet. It was colder, sharper, a sliver of ice forming in the depths of my soul. They had broken me, yes, but they hadn't finished me. Not yet. I remember the chill that ran through me, not from the autumn air, but from the sudden, stark clarity of my own mind. My hands, once deft with circuit boards, were now callous from construction sites, from washing dishes, from 100 dead-end jobs. My mind, once alight with innovation, had been dulled by apathy. But the core of Orrin Kalin, the engineer, the builder, the one who saw patterns and solutions, was still there, buried deep. And in that moment, that core finally asserted itself. I wouldn't just be back. I would be a different Orrin. A harder, smarter, more dangerous Orrin. If you've ever been truly broken, you know that the path back isn't a straight line. It's a crawl through shattered glass. My first step was simply to see what they had become, the empire built on my stolen dreams. I found an old, beat-up Datsun 510, paid cash with the last of my meager earnings, and started driving. Synergy Systems. Their headquarters, once a modest industrial park space, had mushroomed. It was now a gleaming, multi-story monolith of glass and steel in the Pearl District, a stark contrast to the gritty, artistic neighborhood it had once been. A logo, sleek and modern, replaced the original, which had featured a stylized circuit board I had designed. Now, it was just abstract lines, devoid of any hint of my contribution. My contribution. I'd park a few blocks away, hidden in the labyrinth of downtown streets, and just watch the stream of expensive cars, the suited executives bustling in and out, their faces confident, entitled. I saw Torvin Vance once, stepping out of a gleaming Mercedes, his hair grayer, but his smile just as predatory. He carried himself with an air of unchallenged power, a king in his domain. Rylancroft, always a step behind, looked leaner, sharper, his eyes still missing nothing, scanning the street with a quiet intensity that spoke of honed vigilance. They were untouchable, impregnable, and my stomach would clench with a mixture of nausea and a burning, cold certainty. They had not just stolen my company. They had stolen my identity, my future, and they were thriving on it. Synergy Systems was a household name in industrial efficiency, their stocks soaring, their influence expanding globally. News articles, business journals, even local TV spots celebrated Torvin Vance as a visionary, Rylancroft as a shrewd operational genius. My name, Orrin Kalin, was absent, vanished as if I had never existed. Each article was a fresh wound, but it was also fuel. It showed me the scale of what I was up against, and thus the scale of what I needed to become. The first, most immediate obstacle was money. I was flat broke. Revenge, true revenge, wasn't cheap. It required resources, information, leverage. My technical skills were my only asset, but how could I leverage them without drawing attention? I couldn't just walk into a tech company and apply for a job. My gap in employment, my history with Synergy, it was all a red flag. I needed to operate in the shadows, to build my own quiet empire, brick by painful brick. I started small, very small. I rented a dilapidated garage in the outer southeast, near Lent, a neighborhood still clinging to its working-class roots, far from the polished glass of the Pearl. It was damp, smelled of oil and mildew, but it was mine. I scoured pawn shops and surplus stores, slowly reassembling a basic workbench, an old oscilloscope, a soldering iron, a multimeter, tools that felt like extensions of my own hands. Even after years of neglect, my niche, I quickly discovered, was in the forgotten. Factories, small businesses, even hobbyists had older, specialized industrial equipment. Machinery from the 60s and 70s, custom-built interfaces, legacy systems that no one else understood or dared to touch. Modern technicians would just recommend replacement, but I saw the elegant, if aging, logic in their circuitry. I put up flyers in grimy industrial parks, in hardware stores, offering legacy system repair and optimization. Specialists in obsolete tech. My rates were initially low, just enough to buy components and keep the lights on. Word spread, slowly but surely. I didn't advertise. My clients were often desperate, facing expensive replacements or production halts. I fixed things others declared irreparable. I breathed new life into dying machines. I wasn't just fixing, I was reverse engineering understanding, and often subtly improving. My mind, once clouded, began to work back to life, finding satisfaction in solving complex problems in the quiet hum of a resurrected circuit board. My first significant break came from an old lumber mill out past Gresham. Their main processing line, controlled by a custom-built 1970s logic controller, had gone completely haywire. Production was halted, losing them thousands a day. 3 different companies had tried and failed. I spent 3 days hunched over the greasy, archaic system, tracing wires, testing relays, poring over faded, hand-drawn schematics. The problem was subtle, a rare timing fault in a custom-fabricated clock circuit. I isolated it, fabricated a replacement component using scavenged parts, and brought the line back online. The mill owner, a grizzled man named Elias Thorne, paid me double my asking price and introduced me to his network. "You're a wizard, Orrin," he'd said, his voice gruff but sincere. "You see things others don't. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Those words from a stranger began to chip away at the constant drone of useless in my head. My reputation grew. Soon, I wasn't just repairing. I was asked to optimize, to design small, bespoke automation solutions for niche industries. My prices climbed. I started registering my small operation under a shell company, Kalen Innovations, using a P.O. box, keeping my personal address off the grid. I reinvested every penny, upgraded my tools, subscribing to technical journals, and, crucially, buying a used desktop computer, a clunky behemoth, but a powerful gateway to information. Every night, after a day of soldering and troubleshooting, I would sit in my cramped, cold rental room, illuminated by the glow of the screen. I started teaching myself business law, corporate finance, digital forensics, market analysis, everything Torvin had claimed I lacked, everything Ryland had used to manipulate me. I devoured books, articles, online courses. I studied Synergy Systems' financial reports, their press releases, their patent filings. I learned to read between the lines, to see the patterns of growth, the signs of vulnerability, the whispers of their expansion strategy. I began to understand the depth of their deception. The original partnership agreement, the one my old lawyer had skimmed, was a masterpiece of legal entrapment. Clauses I hadn't understood then, performance metrics that were impossible to meet, discretionary powers that allowed them to unilaterally redefine my role. They hadn't just stolen my company. They had legally robbed me, setting the stage from day one. The realization fueled a colder, harder fury. This wasn't just personal. It was a testament to their calculated malevolence. Physical transformation was next. The gaunt reflection from the diner still haunted me. I couldn't afford a gym, so I ran every morning. Before the city stirred, I pounded the pavement to the sprawling, untamed green spaces of Powell Butte Nature Park, the wind whipping to the fir trees. I pushed my body, turning emotional pain into physical endurance. My mind sharpened, my focus unwavering. I wasn't just an engineer anymore. I was a strategist, a student of the game, and a fighter. 7 years had passed since that damn Portland sidewalk. It was now 1985. The city was still growing, changing. So was I. Kalen Innovations was no longer just a one-man garage operation. I had a small team now. 2 brilliant, quiet young engineers, Kieran and Alara, whom I found through university contacts, eager to work on challenging, unconventional projects. They knew my rules: discretion, absolute confidentiality, and a relentless pursuit of excellence. They didn't know the full scope of my personal mission, but they respected my drive and my unorthodox methods. We moved into a more secure, discreet facility in a former printing press building in the industrial stretch near Southeast 82nd Avenue. It had reinforced walls, a heavy-duty power supply, and an anonymous facade. Inside, it was a state-of-the-art lab, humming with custom-built servers, advanced diagnostic equipment, and a secure, encrypted network that was practically Fort Knox. We were building custom industrial control systems, advanced data acquisition units, and even reverse engineering competitors' tech for clients who needed an edge. We were good, we were fast, and we were making serious money, all under the radar. My goal was no longer just survival. It was war. I needed to understand their every move. Synergy Systems was expanding into new sectors: smart city infrastructure, national defense contracts, even consumer home automation. Their reach was vast, their influence undeniable. But I knew their core technology, the foundational architecture of my original sensor, better than anyone. I knew its strengths and, crucially, its potential vulnerabilities. One evening, after Kieran and Alara had left, I sat in my office, the city lights a distant shimmer outside my reinforced window. On my main monitor, a detailed, meticulously researched organizational chart of Synergy Systems spread before me, a spiderweb of names and connections. Torvin Vance and Ryland Croft at the very top, their faces staring out from recent magazine covers. Below them, a host of EPs, department heads, key engineers. I had been compiling this information for months, cross-referencing public records with whispers from my network of industrial contacts. I had learned about their aggressive acquisition strategies, their ruthless tactics against smaller competitors, their carefully cultivated public image. I even had a detailed blueprint of their new Pearl District headquarters, thanks to some clever social engineering and publicly available architectural plans. My eyes drifted to a specific name on the chart: Dr. Alaric Thorne. He was listed as head of R&D Advanced Systems. I remembered Alaric. He had been one of the bright, eager young engineers I had hired back in the early days of Synergy Systems, fresh out of Oregon State. He was brilliant, idealistic, and deeply respected my work. He was one of the few who hadn't looked at me with pity or disdain when I was being escorted out. In fact, I remembered a flicker of something in his eyes that day, something close to sorrow or perhaps even anger. I had been tracking Alaric's career. He'd risen through the ranks, his name now attached to several of Synergy's most innovative patents. He was the technical brain behind their next generation of products, pushing the boundaries of what my original sensor could do. He was deeply embedded, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that he held the keys to unlocking Synergy Systems' most valuable secrets. He was my target, not for harm, but for information. He was a weak link in their armor, not because of disloyalty, but because of his fundamental integrity, which I believed had to still exist, buried under years of corporate polish. He was a man who understood the true elegance of my original vision. And that vision, that truth, was something Torvin and Ryland had systematically buried. I leaned back in my chair, the hum of the servers a comforting backdrop. The ghost in the diner window was gone. In its place was a man forged in fire, stripped of illusion, and armed with a singular, unyielding purpose. I had built myself back from nothing. I had built a new company, a new life, a new identity. And now, I was ready to dismantle theirs. The first step would be the hardest, the most delicate. I needed to reach Alaric Thorne, to bypass the layers of corporate security and personal caution that surrounded him. I needed to remind him of the truth, of the real origins of Synergy Systems. I needed to turn their own brilliance against them. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, a new set of coordinates forming in my mind. It was time to stop watching. It was time to start acting. And it would begin with a ghost in the past, whispering in the ear of a man who had forgotten the true architect of his success. The war was no longer just a distant dream. It was about to begin, and Torvin Vance and Ryland Croft, basking in their stolen glory, had no idea the storm that was brewing, born from the very ashes they thought they had created. If you're enjoying the story, please hit that like button, subscribe, and let us know in the comments. What's the single most valuable thing you've ever lost? The ghost in the diner window had vanished. In its place stood a man forged in fire, stripped of illusion, and armed with a singular, unyielding purpose. I had rebuilt myself from nothing. I had built a new company, a new life, a new identity. And now, I was ready to dismantle theirs. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, the glow of the monitor illuminating the lines of code I'd written, the schematics I designed. This wasn't just about money, or even just about justice anymore. This was about reclaiming a stolen narrative, about proving to the world, and to myself, that I was far from useless. The first step would be the hardest, the most delicate. I needed to reach Alaric Thorne, to bypass the layers of corporate security and personal caution that surrounded him. I needed to remind him of the truth, of the real origins of synergy systems. I needed to turn their own brilliance against them. My initial reconnaissance on Alaric was extensive, a digital shadow stalking that would have been impossible just a few years prior. My clunky desktop, upgraded with custom network cards and a blistering 2400 baud modem, was a portal. I scoured academic journals, technical forums, even local community archives. I learned Alaric's habits, his penchant for obscure classical music, his regular jogs along the Springwater Corridor, his volunteer work at the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, OMSI, and his attendance at specialized lectures on advanced industrial automation. He was a creature of routine, intelligent, and deeply, almost obsessively dedicated to his craft. I found my opening at one such lecture at Oregon State University, a dull-sounding symposium on adaptive neural networks in industrial control systems. Perfect. Alaric, I knew, would be there, less for the speaker and more for the chance to engage in esoteric technical debate. I arrived early, dressed nondescriptly, a forgotten man in the bustling halls of academia. I found a seat near the back, my eyes scanning the room, not for Alaric yet, but for the subtle cues of his world. When he finally entered, he looked much the same as I remembered, perhaps a bit more weary around the eyes, but still possessing that quiet intensity, that focused gaze. His hair was meticulously parted, a stark contrast to my own unruly mane, now streaked with premature gray. He carried a worn leather satchel, not a sleek briefcase, and held a dog-eared copy of a textbook on advanced control theory. He took a seat in the third row, alone, already absorbed in proceedings. He listened, occasionally scribbling notes, sometimes shaking his head almost imperceptibly at a speaker's misstatement, his intellectual gears always turning. I watched him for the entire afternoon, a ghost in periphery. I saw the way he interacted with other attendees, polite but reserved, always steering conversations back to the core technical principles. He was respected, clearly an authority in his field. But I also saw a subtle undercurrent of something else, a flicker of dissatisfaction in his eyes, a guardedness that hinted at more than just professional decorum. Was it the weight of corporate expectation? Or was it the quiet hum of a conscience that hadn't entirely been silenced? That night, back in my secure lab, the hum of servers was a comforting counterpoint to the storm brewing in my mind. I didn't want to approach Alaric directly. That was too risky, too crude. He was smart, and he was deeply entrenched within synergy systems. He wouldn't risk his career, his family, for a ghost. I needed to awaken the engineer in him, the one who revered elegant solutions and truth above all else. I needed to remind him of my fingerprint, the unique style embedded in the core of Synergy's success. My plan involved a digital whisper, a breadcrumb trail that only Alaric would recognize. I had spent weeks crafting a highly specialized, subtly flawed piece of pseudocode. It mimicked a hypothetical vulnerability in a theoretical industrial control system, but the nature of the flaw, its specific logical structure, was an almost exact mirror of a complex, niche problem I had encountered and solved during the initial development of my original sensor. It was a problem so obscure, so particular, that only someone with intimate knowledge of my design, or perhaps the original designer himself, would spot it or understand its profound implications. I packaged this code, along with a brief, anonymous technical paper detailing the hypothetical system, and uploaded it to a series of niche, encrypted bulletin board systems, BBS, and private technical forums. These were the digital watering holes for true experts, the places where engineers like Alaric want to discuss problems too complex or too sensitive for public discourse. I posted it under a randomly generated, untraceable pseudonym, Ether__77. The paper was provocative, hinting at a fundamental instability in a common industrial control paradigm, a subtle flaw that, if exploited, could bring down entire manufacturing lines. It was designed to intrigue, to challenge, and most importantly, to resonate with Alaric's specific technical expertise. The waiting was the hardest part. I monitored the forums with custom scripts, tracking views and replies. Days turned into a week. Then a reply. A user handle I recognized from my deep dive into Alaric's online presence. Cipher_sent. It was a single cryptic query, a question that cut straight to the heart of the hypothetical flaw, revealing an immediate and profound understanding of the underlying architecture I had subtly referenced. It was him. He had taken the bait. I allowed a day to pass before responding, maintaining the illusion of a casual, independent researcher. My reply was equally terse, equally technical, nudging him deeper into the labyrinth of the problem. We exchanged several messages over the next few days, a dance of pure intellect, two minds connecting over a complex technical puzzle. He was sharp as always, but I could feel him circling, trying to pinpoint the source of this peculiar insight. He asked increasingly pointed questions about my research methodology, my background, trying to extract identifying information. My responses were always evasive, always pushing him back to the technical core. Then, in one of my replies, I deliberately included a specific, idiosyncratic phrasing I had often used when explaining complex circuit functions to Alaric in the early days of synergy systems. It wasn't a common phrase. It was a unique turn of words, a conceptual shortcut I had invented. His next message was immediate, less formal, a hint of agitation beneath the controlled technical prose. Your understanding of harmonic resonance in distributed logic arrays is remarkably specific. Have we met Ether_core_77? Bingo! I decided it was time. I sent him a private message, encrypted end-to-end through a bespoke protocol my team had developed. The message was simple. The elegance of the solution lies not in components, but in the vision. Remember the Woodstock garage, Alaric? I believe we have much to discuss. I closed the connection, watching the clock. My heart hammered, a drumbeat against my ribs. This was it, the first direct move. An hour later, my secure terminal chimed. It was Alaric. His message was a single, carefully crafted line. I remember the elegance and the vision. Where can we speak without the noise? I arranged a meeting for a late Saturday afternoon, far from the Pearl District, in a quiet, unassuming coffee shop in Selwood Moorland. It was a place I knew well, a neighborhood that still felt like a relic of old Portland, a comfortable distance from the polished corporate facade of Synergy Systems. I arrived early, taking a secluded booth at the back, a clear view of the entrance, a small, voice-activated recorder hidden in my jacket pocket. When Alaric walked in, he looked older than at the lecture, his shoulders slightly slumped, a furrow of concern etched between his brows. He spotted me immediately, his eyes widening in a mixture of recognition, shock, and a flicker of something akin to fear. He hesitated, then walked slowly toward my booth, his movements deliberate, as if wading through thick air. "Orrin," he whispered, his voice hoarse, as he slid into the seat opposite me. "My God, it's really you." I met his gaze, my own expression carefully neutral. "Hello, Alaric. It's been a long time." 7 years, he corrected, his eyes searching mine. We thought you were gone. Vanished. Torvin and Rylan said you just couldn't handle the pressure, that you chose to leave. Did they now? My voice was calm, devoid of the raw anger that still churned beneath the surface. And did you believe them? He shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. I didn't want to, but after a while, when there was no word, no contact, it was easier to believe it, to move on. He looked up, his gaze intense. "Why now, Orrin? Why after all this time?" Because the wound festered, Alaric. Because what they did was betrayal not just of me, but of the very idea we built Synergy Systems on. The idea of elegant innovation, of genuine progress. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a low, earnest tone. "Do you remember the day, Alaric, when they locked me out, when Torvin called me useless?" He flinched. "I remember the day. I was in shock. I didn't understand. They just said there were restructuring issues, that you weren't a cultural fit anymore. They lied, Alaric. They always lied. They systematically stripped me of my ownership, my patents, my very identity. They used the legal system to steal everything, piece by painstaking piece, while I was busy building their empire." I reached into my satchel, pulling out a slim folder. "I have the original partnership agreement, and I have the restructuring documents they forced me to sign. They're a masterpiece of legal entrapment, designed from day one to cut me out. He took the folder, his hands trembling slightly as he opened it. He scanned the pages, his eyes darting across the clauses, the footnotes, the signatures. I watched his face, saw the color drain from it, saw the dawning realization of the depth of the deception. He was an engineer, a man of logic and truth. This was an undeniable, irrefutable truth. This is abhorrent, he murmured, his voice barely audible. The performance clause is the management discretion. They had this plan from the very beginning. He looked up, his eyes now blazing with quiet fury that mirrored my own. They told me you were just a visionary, a brilliant mind, but not a businessman. They said you signed away your rights because you didn't understand the finer points of corporate law. And they were right to a point. I admitted I was naive. I believed in them. I believed in the handshake, in the shared vision. But they exploited that naivete, Alaric. And they did it to build an empire on my foundation, on my design, on my legacy. But Oren, what do you want? What can you possibly do now? Synergy Systems is a behemoth. Torvin and Ryland, they're untouchable. He looked around the coffee shop, a nervous twitch in his eye. If they ever found out I was talking to you, that's precisely why this conversation remains between us. I said, my voice firm. And what I want, Alaric, is justice. I want to reclaim what was stolen, and I need your help. He stared at me, his conflict visible, warring between his loyalty to a company that had given him a career and the crushing weight of the injustice laid bare before him. My help? Oren, I'm head of R&D. I'm deeply integrated. My family, my life. I understand the risks, Alaric, and I'm not asking you to burn it all down. Not yet. I'm asking you to help me expose the truth, to show the world the true origins of Synergy Systems, to show them the rot at its core. I paused, letting my words sink in. You're the technical architect behind their next generation of products. You know their systems, their vulnerabilities, their future plans better than anyone. You know where the bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking. He closed the folder, his gaze fixed on the table. They've been pushing us, Oren, pushing the boundaries, moving into areas that, well, they're not entirely stable. They're cutting corners on testing for these new smart city contracts, prioritizing rollout over rigorous validation. And the defense contracts, some of the encryption protocols, are, frankly, shoddy. I've raised concerns, but Torvin just brushes them aside, says it's cost efficiency. A cold smile touched my lips. Cost efficiency or catastrophic vulnerability waiting to happen? I knew it. They were overextending, prioritizing profit over the integrity of the technology, the very thing I had always prioritized. Alaric, you've always been a man of integrity, a true engineer. You built your career on the foundation of my work, a foundation they claimed as their own. Don't you think it's time to set the record straight? To protect the integrity of the technology we both believed in? He looked up, his eyes filled with desperate weariness, but also a glimmer of his old idealism. They'll destroy me, Oren. They'll ruin everything. Not if we're smarter. Not if we're careful. I've spent 7 years building a new life, a new network, a new set of capabilities. I'm not the naive young man they cast aside. I have resources, Alaric. I have a team, and I have a plan. A plan to expose their greed, their negligence, and their lies, without putting you in the crosshairs, at least not initially. I extended my hand, not in a handshake, but in an offer of alliance. Help me, Alaric. Help me bring truth back to Synergy Systems. He stared at my hand, then at my eyes, a silent battle raging within him. He knew the truth. He felt the injustice. And he recognized the opportunity to correct a wrong, not just for me, but for the fundamental principles of engineering he held dear. Finally, slowly, he reached out, his hand shaking slightly as it met mine. What do you need? He asked, his voice low, a new resolve hardening his gaze. What's the first step? Access, Alaric. I replied, my grip firm. I need access to their internal network, to their project files, to their communications. I need to see everything from the inside out. Can you give me that? He swallowed hard, his eyes darting around the coffee shop, once more, a primal fear in their depths. It's almost impossible. Their security is state-of-the-art. Encrypted servers, biometric access, multi-factor authentication for everything. Even for me, with my clearance, it's monitored. Every keystroke, every login. Not impossible, Alaric. I corrected. A glint in my eye. Just difficult. And I've been planning for difficult for 7 years. I don't need direct, traceable access. I need an opening, a backdoor, a ghost in the machine. Something that only you, with your deep understanding of their system architecture, could provide. He leaned back, exhaling slowly, a man making peace with a momentous decision. There might be a way. A legacy diagnostic port, designed for emergency access. It's offline, isolated, theoretically. Only a few of us even know it exists. It bypasses some of the primary security layers, but it requires a very specific, undocumented hardware key and a sequence of commands that would look like gibberish to anyone else. My pulse quickened. A legacy diagnostic port. A backdoor left open by oversight or arrogance. It was a kind of flaw only a master architect would leave, and only another master architect would discover. Tell me everything, Alaric. Every detail. Every command. Every idiosyncrasy. He began to speak, his voice gaining confidence as he delved into the technical details, the engineer in him overriding the fearful corporate drone. I listened, absorbing every word, my mind already racing, devising the tools, the code, the plan. This was it, the true beginning of the war. Torvin Vance and Ryland Croft, basking in their stolen glory, had no idea that a ghost in their past had just been invited into the very heart of their empire. And this ghost was armed, not with a weapon, but with the truth and a relentless, unyielding resolve to dismantle everything they had built. The system was about to be breached from within. Alaric's words hung in the air, thick with a mixture of fear and determination. A legacy diagnostic port isolated, theoretically. Only a few of us even know it exists. It bypasses some of the primary security layers, but it requires a very specific undocumented hardware key and a sequence of commands that would look like gibberish to anyone else. My pulse hammered, a primal drumbeat of anticipation. This was it. The key, not a physical key, but a series of precise digital whispers, a ghost key to a ghost door. Tell me everything, Alaric, every detail, every command, every idiosyncrasy. Show me the gibberish. For the next 2 hours, huddled in that quiet booth, Alaric poured out the secrets of Synergy Systems' inner sanctum. He described the diagnostic port, a physical interface hidden deep within the primary server rack in the company's secure data center. He explained the custom-built firmware, the specific chipsets, the exact sequence of power cycling, signal injection, and command line inputs required to activate it without tripping a single alarm. It was a masterpiece of obscure knowledge, a forgotten back door left open by a past generation of engineers, now secured only by its own complexity and the obscurity of its existence. He even drew diagrams on a napkin, the intricate dance of data packets and voltage fluctuations. The hardware key, he explained, isn't a key card. It's a very specific frequency generator, calibrated to a resonant frequency unique to that port's internal oscillator. Without it, the port remains dormant, a dead end. My mind raced, already building the tools, the code, the plan. A frequency generator, I can build one. And the command sequence, you memorize it. Every character, he confirmed, his voice firm now. The fear momentarily eclipsed by the thrill of technical collaboration. I designed the last major upgrade to the data center's power management system. I know its heartbeat. We finalized the plan. Alaric will provide me with a detailed blueprint of the data center, including access routes, camera blind spots, and the exact location of the diagnostic port. He would also ensure that for a specific, narrow window of time, the external network monitoring would be momentarily, subtly throttled, just enough for me to establish a connection without detection. He would blame it on routine maintenance, a common occurrence. My team, Kieran and Alara, would be the unseen support, developing the custom hardware and software necessary to execute the breach. Back in my lab, the atmosphere crackled with a new intensity. Kieran, with her uncanny ability to reverse engineer complex hardware, took on the task of fabricating the frequency generator, meticulously calibrating it to Alaric's precise specifications. Ilara, a coding prodigy, worked tirelessly on bespoke software, a stealthy shell that would allow me to navigate Synergy's network without leaving a trace, bypassing their advanced intrusion detection systems. We were building a digital ghost, designed to slip through the cracks of a meticulously guarded fortress. "This needs to be flawless," I told them, my voice calm but firm. "No errors, no loose ends. They're watching everything, always." They nodded, their faces grim but resolute. They understood the stakes, even if they didn't know the full, personal history behind my relentless drive. They trusted my vision, and that was enough. The weeks leading up to the breach were a blur of sleepless nights, caffeine, and the quiet hum of advanced electronics. I spent hours memorizing the data center layout, rehearsing command sequence until it was etched into my muscle memory. I practiced on a simulated environment my team had built, a digital twin of Synergy's network architecture, identifying potential pitfalls, refining my access vectors. The target date arrived, a Tuesday late at night, during what Alaric had designated as a routine, system-wide backup cycle, a period where network traffic was predictably high, providing optimal cover. I arrived at Synergy Systems' Pearl District headquarters under the cloak of darkness, dressed in the maintenance uniform I had acquired, complete with a fake ID badge. My heart was a steady drum, not with fear, but with a cold, focused resolve. The custom frequency generator, a small, unassuming device, was tucked into my utility belt. My laptop, loaded with Ilara stealth software, was in a discreet carry bag. Inside, the building was eerily quiet, save for the rhythmic whir of air conditioning and the distant thrum of servers. I moved with practiced stealth, navigating the labyrinthine corridors, avoiding security cameras Alaric had marked as active. The data center was a cold, sterile vault, bathed in the soft glow of indicator lights. The air was frigid, smelling of ozone and metal. I located the primary server rack. There it was, hidden behind a service panel, the legacy diagnostic port, a series of small, unlabeled connectors, looking ancient amidst the gleaming modernity of the surrounding hardware. This was the ghost door. I began the sequence. First, the frequency generator, a delicate touch to the specified connector. The device hummed, a barely audible vibration in the silence. Then, the power cycle, a precise, microsecond-perfect manipulation of the rack's internal power supply. Finally, my laptop connected, the screen a symphony of rapidly scrolling code. The command sequence, a string of seemingly random characters, flowed from my fingertips, each input precise, unwavering. A green light flickered on the diagnostic port. A silent cheer erupted in my mind. I was in. The immediate access was limited, a low-level interface that granted me raw system data. But it was enough. Ilara's stealth software, Digital Phantom, began its work, mapping the network topology, identifying vulnerabilities, creating a secure, untraceable tunnel back to my lab. I spent hours in that frigid data center, downloading terabytes of information, financial records, project files, internal communications, patent documentation, even personal emails from Torvin and Rylan. I saw the true depth of their deception, their ruthless exploitation, their casual disdain for anyone who wasn't them. The most damning evidence was tucked away in a series of encrypted folders labeled Project Chimera and Evergreen Oversight. It detailed the systematic cutbacks on safety protocols for the smart city infrastructure projects, the use of substandard components to boost profit margins, and the deliberate obfuscation of critical vulnerabilities in their defense contracts. They weren't just greedy. They were criminally negligent, putting lives and national security at risk for a bottom line. And in the Evergreen Oversight files, I found irrefutable proof, a meticulously documented trail of how they had manipulated my original partnership agreement, falsified performance reviews, and fabricated the management discretion clauses to legally seize control of Synergy Systems. It wasn't just my perception. It was a calculated, premeditated theft. As the sun began to paint the sky with streaks of pre-dawn light, I disconnected, leaving no trace of my presence. The diagnostic port returned to its dormant state, the ghost receding into machine. I slipped out of the building, my bag heavier, my resolve solidified. The war was no longer just a distant dream. It was now within my grasp. Over the next few weeks, Alaric and I worked in secret, cross-referencing the stolen data with his institutional knowledge. He identified key personnel, confirmed specific projects, and helped me understand the full scope of Synergy's vulnerabilities. We unearthed a cache of internal memos where Torvin explicitly overruled Alaric's warnings about system instability, prioritizing deadlines over safety. Rylan, ever the enforcer, had quietly purged any dissenting voices from project teams. My plan for revenge was no longer about simple exposure. It was about poetic justice, about turning their own hubris and their own technology against them. Synergy Systems was preparing for its annual Innovation Summit, a lavish affair held at the Oregon Convention Center, where Torvin Vance would unveil their new Synergy Global Command Center, a supposedly revolutionary platform designed to manage all their smart city and industrial infrastructure projects from a single, centralized interface. It was a digital crown jewel, a testament to their dominance. It was also the perfect target. My team, under my direction, began crafting a sophisticated, self-propagating worm. It wasn't designed to destroy, but to reveal. It was coded to exploit the very vulnerabilities Torvin had ignored, targeting the integrated display systems of the Global Command Center. The worm would remain dormant, a digital sleeper agent, until activated by a specific, external trigger. The day of the Innovation Summit arrived. The convention center buzzed with anticipation. Investors, industry leaders, and media converged, eager to witness Synergy's latest triumph. Torvin Vance, ever the showman, stood on a gleaming stage, bathed in the glow of a massive, curved LED screen that displayed the Synergy Global Command Center interface. Rylan Croft stood silently to his left, a shadow of power. I was there, a face in the crowd, blending in with the hundreds of attendees. Alaric was also there, positioned near a stage-side technical station, ostensibly monitoring the presentation, but in reality, awaiting my signal. Kieran and Alara were back at the lab, ready to execute their part of the plan. Torvin began his presentation, his voice booming with practiced confidence. He spoke of vision, of progress, a safer, smarter future built by Synergy Systems. The Global Command Center interface glowed behind him, an elegant, interactive display of maps, data points, and operational metrics. Then my signal, a pre-programmed message sent via an untraceable satellite link to Alara's system. On the massive screen behind Torvin, the elegant interface flickered. A ripple of unease passed through the audience. Torvin paused, a slight frown on his face. "Just a minor hiccup, ladies and gentlemen," he chuckled, attempting to recover. "Live demonstrations, you know how it is." But the hiccup wasn't minor. The display began to distort, the clean lines of the Global Command Center dissolving into a chaotic jumble of raw data. Text, small at first, began to scroll rapidly across the screen, overlaid on the corrupted interface. It was snippets of internal memos, project reports, and financial projections. Alaric, at the technical station, suddenly looked up, a look of controlled panic on his face, playing his part. He gestured frantically at the technicians. "What's happening?" The scrolling text grew larger, bolder, impossible to ignore. It wasn't just random data. It was my data. Project Chimera, component substitution authorized by TV. Cost savings, 12%. Acceptable risk, high. Defense Contract Alpha, encryption protocol deviation. RC approved, no impact to operational efficiency. Internal audit, smart city infrastructure. Phase 3 critical vulnerability. TV directive. Proceed with deployment. And then, the most damning of all, Orin Kalen equity dilution, legal justification. PRE plan performance clauses, executive approval. TV RC date, September 29, 1978. The murmurs in the audience grew into a roar. Reporters began snapping photos, whispering furiously into their phones. Torvin's face had gone ashen, his smile replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated terror. Rylan, usually so composed, was barking orders at the stage technicians, but it was too late. The worm was not just displaying data. It was hijacking the global command center, revealing the very rot they had tried to conceal. Suddenly, the screen changed again. The scrolling text vanished, replaced by a single, stark image. A faded, grainy photograph of a young man, my younger self, standing in a cramped garage, surrounded by circuit boards and wires. Beneath it, in bold, stark letters, appeared. Synergy Systems, born from the vision of Orrin Kalin. Built on lies. Maintained by negligence. Exposed by truth. The image held for a long, agonizing moment, then dissolved into a flurry of static. The entire global command center system crashed, the massive screen going dark with a dull thud. Chaos erupted. The media surged forward, microphones extended, cameras flashing. Investors were on their feet, shouting questions, demanding answers. Torvin Vance, pale and sweating, tried to stammer out an explanation, but his words were lost in the pandemonium. Rylancroft, his face a mask of furious disbelief, was being accosted by a furious board member. I watched it all, a quiet observer in the storm. The revenge was sweet, precise, and utterly devastating. Their empire, built on deceit, was crumbling before their very eyes, publicly, irrevocably. Over the next few days, the story exploded. Investigative journalists, armed with the anonymous data dump I had sent them, a more comprehensive version of what was displayed at the summit, carefully curated to protect Alaric, tore through Synergy Systems operations. The SEC launched an investigation. Government contracts were frozen. Lawsuits from aggrieved clients and defrauded investors piled up. The stock plummeted, wiping out billions. Torvin and Rylan, once revered titans of industry, became pariahs. Their faces plastered across every news outlet, synonymous with corporate malfeasance. Alaric, his position compromised but his conscience clear, became a key whistleblower, his testimony solidifying the claims against Torvin and Rylan. He was granted immunity, his career tarnished but his integrity intact. He would rebuild, I knew, and he would do it ethically. Torvin Vance and Rylancroft faced criminal charges. Their arrogance, their greed, their casual destruction of a young man's dream had finally caught up with them. The company, Synergy Systems, was dismantled, its assets sold off, its name forever synonymous with scandal. I never approached them directly. I never revealed my hand. My revenge was not about personal confrontation, but about silent, absolute destruction. I had taken back my narrative, my legacy. I had proven, to myself and to the world, that I was far from useless. Kalin Innovations continued to thrive, but under an even deeper veil of secrecy. We specialize in secure, ethical industrial automation, trusted by a select few clients who valued integrity above all else. I was wealthy, powerful, and respected in my own hidden sphere. But the Orrin Kalin who walked out of that Portland autumn rain 7 years ago was gone. The naive idealist had been burned away, replaced by a man of cold, calculating precision. The fire of revenge had purified me, yes, but it also hardened me, leaving behind a core of unyielding steel. I saw the world with stark clarity, devoid of the gentle illusions I once held. Trust was a rare commodity, and vigilance a constant companion. Sometimes, late at night, in the quiet of my secure lab, I would look at the framed photo of my grandmother, her gentle smile a distant memory. I had achieved my justice, but the cost was immeasurable. The joy, the simple faith in humanity I once possessed, had been replaced by a quiet, chilling satisfaction. I was victorious, but the battle had left an indelible mark. I was no longer just Orrin Kalin, the engineer. I was the architect of shadows, the ghost in the machine, and the relentless hand of justice. And that, I realized, was a chilling resolution indeed. The end,